What's up, everybody? Came across this video. It's an hour and 37 minutes long, and there are quite a few members of the press, probably local media press, asking some very critical questions to this lying sack of shit right here regarding the Fox Lake, Illinois police hoaxing shooting back in 2015. You remember, some of you may remember, it started out as a so-called shooting and a manhunt, and later on they said it was a well-staged suicide. At the beginning of the investigation, this guy came out and said they collected DNA from the site of the so-called shooting, and later on they said it was a suicide. So members of the press are asking, what about this DNA? Where is it? Can we see it? Are you going to destroy the DNA evidence? Yada yada yada. He's saying, well, the DNA was probably collected by the police officer to stage his own suicide, blah blah blah. But I just want you to listen to some of these questions here, and then following this, I'm just going to let you watch the whole video if you want to. The whole thing, I'm going to have it on here. But I'm going to post this video that I'm talking on right now and that video separately, and then later on I'm going to combine the two. And the only reason I'm not combining it now is because it just takes so long, and I want to let people know that this video exists, and I'll leave the link in this video. So,
Commander, it took you weeks to announce that he was at the crime scene, up to 26 minutes before he radioed in. In fact, a member of the media had to ask you that, and you said that's a good question. In fact, we'll reveal that. Were you intentionally withholding that crucial piece of information, and why?
We weren't intentionally withholding it. We do withhold information based on the fact that we're still conducting an active homicide investigation, and we do want to withhold facts that only the victim, the investigative unit, or the offender or offenders would know.
Commander, how much money?
I'm sorry. I don't have any information regarding it. I don't believe he had any involvement in it. No.
Commander, it's fair to say that you and your fellow investigators were reluctant to come to a conclusion that this was suicide, and is it in any way personally embarrassing to you as a law enforcement officer and your fellow investigators to have to come to this conclusion?
I'll answer that by telling you that we don't assume, we don't presume, we don't jump to conclusions. We go where the facts lead us, and until every stone is turned over, every fact in detail examined, and we can confidently say that this is what our conclusion is, that this is a staged suicide. The embarrassment comes to me personally that this is the first time as a law enforcement officer in my career that I've felt ashamed by the acts of another police officer.
Commander, would you make clear about the crime scene? Was it so convincing? Was the job that he did trying to set up this crime scene so convincing that veteran law enforcement officers arriving there would have thought there was a homicide and that there were suspects on the loose? And part two, do you have a cost for this investigation?
I don't have a cost for this investigation. I believe that any law enforcement officer with investigative experience would not have jumped to any conclusions, would have seen that what appeared to be a struggle of sorts, an ambush. We explored every possibility.
basically what that guy just asked is, how many veteran law enforcement officers were out there, and what was so convincing that made you think that this was a homicide investigation initially and then you changed it to suicide later? So basically he's mocking the police department for initially saying it was a homicide and changing it to suicide later. And then he asks, how much did this entire investigation cost? Now, if you remember, there was helicopters, there was media coverage, there was GoFundMe pages, there was millions of fucking dollars wasted on this shit PsyOp. And the media is onto that, and they're asking important questions. if I was there, I would be asking even more important questions, but I think the media, probably some of the more honest media, if there are any, are scared to ask the real questions because they know what could happen.
Of what could have happened out there. We explored the fact that there could have been 3 subjects, there could have been 2, there could have been 1 subject that he had met there for a specific reason.
Now, if you remember, they said they had video evidence of 3 suspects in the area. What happened to those 3 suspects?
And he was ambushed.
Massive manhunt.
Okay.
During that time.
Let me correct that. We, meaning the Lake County Major Crime Task Force, did not have a massive manhunt. That is correct. So a couple of things you need to consider there. One, you have an officer that is found with a mortal gunshot wound. You also, at that point, have a missing weapon. That weapon was not recovered until about an hour and a half to 2 hours into the response. So
I'm going to pause this for a second and then pause the video and then show you that he actually said the weapon was found 2 feet above the guy's head, but just now he said the weapon was nowhere to be found.
Now into the response, 1.5 to 2 hours, that weapon was not recovered until about an hour and a half to 2 hours into the response.
Okay, here's where he says the gun was right above the guy's head, 2 feet above his head, or 2.5 feet, something like that.
Conclusion. Though it was not a revolver, it was his semi-automatic weapon. It was found exactly 2.5 feet above his head.
Can you elaborate on the multiple sources of DNA found in the scene? And also, how does this change the death benefits for these families?
I can't comment on the death benefits. I'm not familiar with the processes there.
Multiple sources of DNA found at the scene. Can you elaborate on those?
The DNA samples, and again, working with the analysts at the FBI and with our crime lab, we've determined that those were, in great probability, just transferences of DNA that could have occurred in any number of places.
Now remember, they said they found DNA samples at the scene of the so-called crime. Not only that, they went house to house collecting DNA samples from locals, okay? And now they're saying it was a suicide, or they've said it was a suicide. I mean, this is somewhat of an older story, but this is the first time I've ever came across this long, in-depth video where the media is actually asking good questions. All right, now moving back to the gun, he said, what did he say? It was not a revolver. It was a semi-automatic weapon, and it was 2.5 feet from his head. All right. Now, if we go back to this question here,
that weapon was not recovered until about an hour and a half to 2 hours into the response.
Okay, so they found the weapon 2.5 feet above Lieutenant Gliniewicz' head, but not until 2.5 hours after the investigation started? Are you fucking kidding me? Who the fuck do they have working this investigation? Gomer fucking Pyle? Oh my lord. Barney Fife?
So, you now, based on the radio traffic...
Or was there no investigation and it was just a big media show? Yes, I'm leaning towards the latter.
Based on the radio traffic and the fact that the weapon is missing, you have potentially...
How's the weapon missing? You just said you found it 2.5 feet above his head.
Armed and dangerous in the area.
How was the weapon wasn't found if it was 2.5 feet from his body?
Ah, thank you. Thank you. Did you hear what he said? How is it that the weapon was not found when he said it was 2.5 feet from his body?
In the area.
How was the weapon wasn't found if it was 2.5 feet from his body?
If you had occasion to see this area, it is very grassy, overgrown. In fact, unless you literally walked up onto the weapon, you wouldn't find it.
You're so fucking full of shit.
Everyone else is the fact that you had a manhunt going on for, I think, about 10 hours exercise, and all of a sudden, it seemed to end. Yes, there were door knocking by police, but that began to raise questions in our mind. Was there any question in the investigators' mind that prompted them to say, we don't need to keep looking in this massive way for 3 suspects?
I'm not going to speak for the command staff of the manhunt itself, but I believe the decision was made because they had expended every resource and every officer and every possibility, and it was getting into the late evening hours. And I remember they had air support out there. They had approximately 48 canines out there. They felt that they had done a thorough search of that inner perimeter, and their thought process was that whoever did this had escaped that perimeter prior to the arrival of all those officers. And if you know anything about setting up perimeters, they just don't happen within a few minutes.
I think you've avoided this question already, but just to be clear.
Yes, sir.
Has your victimization study, your extensive research into his past, was that heavily buried?
I'll leave that question for Mrs. Gliniewicz when you interview her.
He said that he already avoided that question once. Whatever the question was, I couldn't hear it. I'm sorry, but.
May I ask a question? We go beyond the crimes. You're saying that he placed things in a way that made veteran investigators like my colleague Sarah here, believe that this could have been, there could have been 2, 3 other suspects in this case. But how does he fool the coroner? When we're talking about a medical examination, what on the body, was there anything to indicate that there was some sort of altercation? Because there would be signs of an altercation on the body. There would be an altercation. Is that correct?
Well, some of the Doctor.
There were some injuries to his head, approximately 10 or 12 abrasions or contusions, bruises to his head, many of which were probably due to the increased thickness of the shrubbery that he had to go to. Also, remember, when he gets shot in the right vest, he falls probably backwards, and there are bruises at the back of the head. Also, when he is about to die, remember, he probably stayed alive for 1 or 2 minutes because the shot went to the artery, not to the heart. So he probably staged where he wanted to go down, and he fell forward, so his nose is bruised. So there are blunt force injuries or external injuries.
Fell forward? I thought he just said he fell backwards. Which one is it?
Heart. So he probably for 1 or 2 minutes because he is about to die, and there are bruises at the back of the head. He falls probably backwards, and there are bruises at the back of the head. Also, when he is about to die, remember, he probably stayed alive for 1 or 2 minutes because the shot went to the artery, not to the heart. So he probably staged where he wanted to go down, and he fell forward, so his nose is bruised. So there are...
You just fucking said he probably fell backwards. Now you're saying he did fall forward.
Blunt force injuries or external injuries to the head. No, there are no injuries to the arms or legs. The real question is, did he know an individual? When we look at this, did he know an individual? And then the individual got the best of him? And therefore there was no attack on him or defensive wounds on him? So we have to put that into concept too. Did he know the individual? And did the individual...
Let's ask this question. Are you lying? Is this guy lying? Is the other guy, whatever the hell his name is, lying? Yes, most likely. Those are more probable than your bullshit story.
Move fast on him and shoot him.
Their case before making your determination. At what point did this, after the autopsy was done, did you believe this was a suicide?
I didn't believe it was anything until I got his report. If you look at the newspaper articles, I have said that I don't know how that bullet got into that individual. However, because the task force is pursuing it as a homicide, therefore I'm leaning towards a homicide, but I can't make that decision until the task force does their work.
You know, you can tell your gut feeling that something this does not fit the typical profile, of a murder, or there was a struggle, there was some kind of interaction between somebody playing for his life. There was none of that in your evidence. You must have thought this was a suicide much earlier on.
When I walked away from the table, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was a suicide, homicide, or accident. Again, the commander's investigation is what's going to happen, or is going to help me in determining that manner of death. I don't know how that bullet got there. If you just go to an autopsy table and you see this, you don't know how it got there without knowing the crime scene. I needed the final report from the crime scene. I can't make based on what the commander just said about his dealings with the explorers and the use of money, I would presume that this individual, the lieutenant, obviously knew he had legal problems. I think he knew there was the possibility of incarceration. His view in the community would be greatly diminished. We know that he was depressed during the final few weeks. Untreated depression results in suicide 90% of the time. So, based on that information, this to me is a suicide.
I want to see the facts. I want to see the spreadsheet that says untreated depression results in suicide 90% of the time. I want to see that factual evidence, not this lying sack of shit's words. Because I've, throughout my life, met many depressed people who have never committed suicide.
Something they just decided to wound himself for some reason.
Do any of the three of you have any regret when this is all said and done about this intense investigation, the amount of resources allocated, the funeral support, your departments for a while seeing you not getting along with each other, this massive media presence, everything that went on? Does anybody have any regrets about how anything happened during the investigation?
I have no regret. I think you have to understand, in this day and age, everything is instantaneous with the internet. Obtaining DNA analysis, putting together all this evidence takes time. I'm clearly amazed now that the commander told me how much information he was studying, that he got it done in 60 days. I think that is incredible, okay? Because I'm no more information that we're not going to let out. And I was stunned when I met Monday with the amount of information he got and the conclusions he got. I'll answer that. We met on Monday.
I just want to point this out. There's a number of people asking these questions. Lots and lots of people. All of whom are angry, upset, and, they're probably starting to put together the pieces of what's going on in this country. All the false shootings, the hoaxes, etc. So there's all these people asking these three guys these questions, critical questions about the money, about the GoFundMe pages, but only these three guys are defending their positions. Nobody else, just these three guys. So who is it? Is it all the media asking all the questions? My channel, other channels pointing out the inconsistencies, or is it these three guys? Are all of us full of shit, and all the media and everybody else asking these important questions completely full of shit and completely batshit crazy and conspiracy theorists or whatever you want to call it? Or is there an actual conspiracy going on in this country and around the world?
And that's when he gave me the information. Okay.
And I'll reiterate this. We conduct all of our investigations in a thorough, chronological order to seek the truth. Now, whether that takes days, months, and in some cases years, we'll continue to do that to bring justice and seek the truth. What is your question?
She was asking about what about all the people in the community that were very, very scared, and they were told that they were in danger and to shelter in place, yada, yada, yada. They were scared for a very long time.
Well, I believe that the Lake County Sheriff's Office, as well as the local police presence, was upgraded substantially to try to bring some peace of mind to the community. I can't alter the facts, and the fact of the matter is
You are a professional at altering facts, you piece of shit.
that for several weeks we were investigating a homicide that possibly involved 3 individuals. I can't change that fact until we reach conclusive results. Do you want to finish?
You know, let's do this. We'll take 2 more questions.
Oh, you guys are being entirely too critical, and you're stumping us quite a bit, and we can't have that, so let's just take 2 more questions.
I believe the village administrator from Fox Lake has a statement she wishes to read.
Well, we believe the staging was extensive. I can't give you a timeline, but we believe it was within a short period of time prior to the staged suicide. It's an extremely good question.
Okay. He's admitting that there was staging. He's saying that the other cop, the dead cop, the one who can't speak for himself, the so-called dead cop, we don't even know. Maybe he never even existed. Maybe we're looking at Photoshop pictures. I don't know. But he's saying that that was staged, right? But everybody else is asking all these questions because it just doesn't make sense. You know, there are instances where people stage their suicide to make it look like a murder, but it doesn't get this many questions asked. It doesn't raise this much scrutiny and this much criticism. So, did the guy stage his suicide, or did these 3 stooges stage something else? And the media, the mainstream media, and the federal government. Yes, my guess is these 3 stooges and the federal government and the media staged something.
The question was, do you believe at some point he may have seen 3 individuals? And that's where the thought process came in. Part of the review and analysis of what we did with the videotapes and locating those 3 individuals, there was a great possibility that Lieutenant Gliniewicz may have driven by those 3 individuals on his way to that scene.
If you remember, they said they had video evidence of 3 males, 2 black, 1 white, at the scene of the crime. They were the suspects, and everybody was on lockdown. Nobody could come out of their houses. There was helicopters everywhere. There was militarized police everywhere. There was canines. There was snipers. There was armored personnel carriers. There was everything. But the 3 individuals turned out to be nobody. They had nothing to do with it. It was a well-staged suicide. Yep, that's a believable story.
I'm going to introduce Village Administrator Ann Marin from the Village of...
Alright, I'm going to go back here and let you hear some of the questions that were asked before.
An analysis of what we did with the videotapes and locating those started coming together, which again, I will tell you, took several weeks. Then we started concluding and moving towards the suicide.
It's very difficult to believe that there was an investigation going on. You knew there was an investigation going on. He was called into the village manager's office the day before the suicide. You knew all of this, and yet you saw some of this evidence and some of it that didn't make sense, and you still insisted for 2 months that it was a homicide investigation first. How could you do that to the public? The people who drank the Kool-Aid, the people who said, I'm going to, give money to this GoFundMe account. This is a hero. And you kept it for 2 months when you did know that that was a very, very strong possibility. How could you do that?
I can completely disagree with you. We didn't.
Fuck you. She had a great question. Alright, I'll leave the link to this video so everybody can check it out, make copies, make lots of copies, whatever you gotta do, whatever you want to do. Peace.